Earlier today, the Majority Leader and the Majority Whip came to the floor to decry and denounce, attack Republicans for what appeared to be literally everything bad that's happened in the world in the last several years, and to the point to where you have to ask yourself, do they really believe what they're saying? They came down here to talk about how Republicans are blocking this or blocking that, and I think it's important to point out that now for the past 6 years, the Democrats have been the majority party here in the United States Senate. In fact, for 2 of those years, they had a filibuster-proof 60-vote majority in the United States Senate. Filibuster-proof. Could literally do anything they wanted to in the United States Senate. They had a majority in the House of Representatives, and of course they got the presidency. And if you look at the volume of legislation that was produced at the time, most of the things that were accomplished with the 60-vote filibuster-proof majority were things that the American people disagreed with. I think is evidenced now by what you see in terms of public opinion polling about the health care bill. Most people disagree with the individual mandate that was included in that legislation and disagree generally with many of the provisions in the bill. But my point very simply is, for a period of time, the Democrats literally had the run of the tables here in Washington, D.C. as we know it. A filibuster-proof 60-vote majority in the Senate, a majority in the House of Representatives, and the presidency. And yet they come down and decry Republicans as being responsible for all the things that have or haven't happened here in the United States Senate. And one of the things that they point out is that there is this attempt by Republicans to continue to filibuster legislation. And I would argue, Madam President, nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, everybody knows in the Senate that the Majority Leader is the person who is first to be recognized on the Senate floor, which allows him to use that power to offer a series of Democrat amendments to pending legislation in a way that prevents Republicans from offering their own ideas. It's called filling the tree. It's sort of a term of art that's used around here in the Senate, but filling the tree essentially is what the Democrat Majority Leader has the opportunity to do because he has the power of recognition, and he can fill the amendment tree and prevent Republican amendments from being offered and voted on. Now, interestingly enough, Majority Leader Reid once insisted that this practice, and I quote, runs against the basic nature of the Senate. Let me repeat that. Majority Leader Reid once insisted that filling the amendment tree, I quote, runs against the basic nature of the Senate, end quote. But by the way that the Senate operates today, it's pretty clear that he's abandoned that assessment. According to the Congressional Research Service, the CRS, the Majority Leader Reid, I should say, has employed this tactic a record of 59 times. He's used it to block minority input into legislation 50% more often than the past 6 majority leaders combined. I think that's worth repeating. This Majority Leader has used the filling of the tree procedure 50% more often than the past 6 majority leaders combined. So the only option that the minority is left with under that scenario is to basically try and get votes on amendments and to work with the majority, in which case the majority says, no, we aren't going to give you an amendment, we filled the tree, and so we invoke cloture, and we end up having a vote on cloture. And what we've seen repeatedly now is the Senate sort of break down into this state of dysfunction simply because the majority doesn't want to make tough votes on amendments. And so we've seen this over and over and over again. As I said, it's historic and unprecedented in terms of the number of times that this has occurred in the United States Senate. And I would also suggest that the real reason probably that we don't have votes on amendments and that the filling of the tree is used repeatedly is because members on the other side don't want to make the hard decisions, don't want to cast the tough votes. And I think that's evidenced as well by the fact that for 3 years in a row now, we haven't had a budget here in the United States Senate. If there was a real interest in solving problems, you would think that the majority, again, which is has a responsibility to put a budget on the floor, would bring a budget to the floor that would set a direction for the future of this country and ask members of the United States Senate to vote on it, to vote on amendments, to have an opportunity to say to the American people, this is how we would lead the country. That hasn't happened now for over 1,100 days for the past 3 years. Republicans are ready and willing to work with the majority, as we have evidenced on many occasions. In fact, we're going to debate this next week Farm Bill legislation, something that there is bipartisan support for here in the United States Senate. I would argue there are many things that we would like to see done. We would love to have an opportunity to vote on extending the tax rates that are in effect today, which is something that even President Clinton in the last few days has come out in support of. Because we know, everybody here knows, that we're facing this fiscal cliff. Could be very, very dangerous to our economy if steps are not taken to prevent and avoid that. And we would be more than willing to work with the majority on extending the tax rates to give some certainty to our job creators and our small businesses. We'd also like to work with them on the sequester that's going to happen at the end of the year and redistributing those cuts in a way that doesn't completely decimate our national security budget. There are lots of things that the Republicans are ready to work with our colleagues on the other side on when it comes to trying to grow the economy in this job and create jobs. But frankly, we believe that it is important that we at least have an opportunity to get amendments debated and voted on. And that simply hasn't happened, as I pointed out, by the number of times that the majority leader has filled the tree. And so I'm not suggesting that there isn't plenty of blame to go around in Washington for the state of the situation that we're in. All I'm simply saying is that for the majority leader to come down here and suggest that somehow Republicans are responsible for gridlock here in the United States Senate is complete denial of reality and denial of the facts. As I said before, they had a period here for a few years where they had the complete run of the place. You had a 60-vote filibuster-proof majority in the Senate, a majority in the House of Representatives, and the presidency enable you to do anything that you literally wanted to do, and still have the majority in the United States Senate, the ability to control the agenda and to determine what does and doesn't come to the floor, what amendments are allowed, the use of the filling of the tree in an unprecedented way. It's pretty clear to me that to suggest for a moment that it's Republicans who are attempting to slow things down around here or keep the majority from working its will is completely contrary to the facts and the reality, as I think most senators, all senators, I think, know. And I know that my colleague from Wyoming is someone who is somewhat new here, but has been here long enough now to have seen many times where the majority has prevented the minority from actually offering amendments, getting votes on amendments on the floor of the United States Senate. And I would just suggest to him and allow him to make some observations with regard to the subject as well, because it strikes me at least that he and I both and many of our colleagues are very interested in working with the majority on things that would actually put people back to work, get our economy growing again. We would love to have that opportunity.